Bookworks is happy to present Valerie Martinez. She received her MFA in poetry from the University of Arizona in 1989. She has published several books of poetry, as well as winning numerous awards for her books. Her poems have appeared widely in journals, media outlets, and anthologies, including Best American Poetry, The Washington Post, American Poetry Next Generation, and Touching the Fire, 15 Poets of Today's Latino Renaissance. She's previously taught at universities of Arizona, New Mexico, and Miami, College of Santa Fe, New Mexico Highlands University, and the Institute of American Indian Arts. She was Poet Laureate of Santa Fe, New Mexico from 2008 to 2010. And in describing the book, I'd like to quote Mia Leonin on the back, who did a review of Count, Valerie's latest book. In Count, Valerie Martinez tethers science, art, memory, myth, and narrative to the exquisite language of poetry. Confronting the devastating effects of climate change, these miraculous poems exude the multiplicity of Count's Spanish language cognate, cantar, reminding us that to count is not simply to make a calculation. It is to tell a story, to observe, and above all, to witness. Martinez's poems bear unflinching and rapturous witness to our natural world in distress and our denial in bloom. And now let us bear witness to Valerie Martinez.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much, Bookworks. I love Bookworks. Buy your books from Bookworks. As you know, independent bookstores have had a really rough year, and they've always just been so welcoming to me and my work and all the writers I know in New Mexico. And so I'm thank you from the bottom of my heart. I do want to start by saying that I live on the ancestral homelands of the Tiwa people, whose descendants include the pueblos of Sandia and Isleta, and I'm indebted to the original indigenous peoples and caretakers of this land, including the Pueblo, Diné, Apache, Comanche, Ute, and others. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to the land itself. Also on my mind is all of those in the path of Hurricane Ida, which is making landfall, as you all know right now. This book, in part, speaks to that and the reasons why we're having these more severe hurricanes. And so I have all of them in my heart. So I have a lot of thank yous, and I'm going to do a short introduction. Then I'm going to read a little from the book and then take your questions or comments. And then if we have a little time at the end, we're looking at about an hour, I can read maybe the ending of the book. So I want to thank University of Arizona Press, which has published several of my books, and I love the press. This book, like all university presses, has to go through a review process. And so there are several readers who read and give you feedback, and that's always been really, really helpful. And with my last two books that have been book-length poems, their feedback has been really wonderful, and their marketing and all their staff are really wonderful. So the cover of this book, Baja Erland is here, and if you give a wave, Baja, she very, very generously allowed us to use one of her photographs or images for the book. If you don't know about Baja's work, you should. She does really, really beautiful, important work around water and rivers. You can go to her website, BASIAIRLAND.com, BajaErland.com. Baja, thank you so much for being here and for allowing me to use the image on this book. I want to thank Rigoberto Gonzalez. He's the series editor, the Camino del Sol. This is the series for this book, and he wrote a foreword. Francisco Aragon, Juliana Spar, Anne Fisher-Worth, Brenda Cardenas, Mia Leonin, they all wrote blurbs for the books, wonderful writers whose work I admire greatly. Amanda, you're here, Amanda Sutton. Thank you so much. You set up this reading in the first place, and I'm grateful to you. My river sisters, Bobby Basold and Dominique Mazot, together we hiked, walked and lived on the endangered Santa Fe River in 2012. You'll hear this in the book. 54 miles, took us 5 days, 4 nights and 5 days in the Rivers Run Through Us project. And David Steinberg, who wrote an article in the Albuquerque Journal today. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, for those of you that came in a little bit later, the dedication of this book are to all the children of the Martinez Ridgely Resnick family, my family, 8 of them who range in ages from 26 to 14. And my husband, Paul, who also appears in this poem, and my family and friends who just make my life as a writer possible and have supported me throughout. So this book is 8 years in the making. My last book actually appeared 10 years ago. I had 2 books in 2010, so it took a long time. I also do other things in this world, so I try to squeeze in writing in the midst of working full time and doing all sorts of other things. So this book took a long, long time, 8 years. And it was sparked by a couple of things. I have a particular interest in what's happening with our climate and our planet. And so I'm always doing quite a bit of research and about that and staying up with everything. So that was just a constant. And then in about 2011, I started, it's like a daydream. I started to see this girl from behind, not really asleep like a dream, but sort of a vision. And I didn't understand why she kept coming to me. She was always facing away from me, standing at the ocean's edge. It was always overcast, and I would sort of see her, and I didn't know why she was coming to me, but it explains why there are a lot of adolescents in this book. And then in the academic year 2012 and 2013, I was a visiting professor at the University of Miami. And so I spent this academic year there. And I mentioned this in the book. So I went from the high desert, New Mexico, back and forth to a place where water is everywhere, water in the air, water all around. And that moving back and forth to a place that's full of water, and also looking at significant flooding in the next years, and coming back to the high desert, and all of those things sort of came together to start this book. So because this is a book-length poem, there are actually 43 sections. It's hard to pick out individual sections to read. So I'm going to read from the first part of the book. And what you should know is you don't need to worry about it being linear. It's a collage for the most part. There is a kind of architecture to the book. For those of you who live in Albuquerque, is the hike, the La Luz Trail. So sort of it pops up every once in a while in the book, this hike up to the top of the peak of the Sandias and back down. And that comes up like a stitch throughout the book. But other than that, a lot of things are happening in this book. And so you can sort of relax and not worry about sort of finding a particular linear narrative. There are personal stories and anecdotes, references to works of art, details and sort of homages to flora and fauna, counting numbers, counting up and down, and water, 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 which is at the center of the poem. And I like to call this book a love story to the natural world, to the children in my life, with a dark foreboding of the devastations of climate change and a kind of plea to learn to live our lives in balance and in reverence for the planet. So that's my introduction. I'm going to read for about 20 minutes and then open this up to questions, and we'll go from there. Again, thank you all so much for being here. And then the sections are numbered in this book, so I will read the numbers of the sections. Count. 1. Saturday afternoon with Serafina in the back seat, tethered to iPhone, singing somewhere between off-key and tune, we approach the girl on the median, a handwritten sign, car wash, you know you want one. Eyelet top, short shorts, black bra peeking through, long line of cars, men folded over windows, flipping U-turns into a parking lot, where the football team kicks back in lawn chairs, where more girls in cutoffs and bikini tops soap up sedans, pickups, and the water sliding off hubcaps, pooling on asphalt, pouring endlessly into storm drains. I watch Fina, almost 13, turn her head till her neck can no longer twist, and I am dumbstruck for once. Male gaze, division of labor, critical drought. She eyes me expectant. Instead, I go deep in, remember the Thornycroft's giraffe, strangely isolated from the herd, bending to her dead calf, splaying, standing, splaying again. I say nothing. 2. Near the La Luz trailhead, 7,032 feet, we sidestep a thicket, Cylindropuntia imbricata. Drought tolerant, difficult to kill, stippled with bees and magenta blooms, the spaces it fills in the shadows of colossal boulders. We hike up southeast, watch a lip of brown creep up the foothills, inch by inch, below which the green world disappears. It's hard not to think akin, continuous, north and south, Greenland with its radical ice melt, the advance of the Atacama Desert. When I hear it, a brimming, a lapping, a sequence of little roars. Let us go now, you and I, to the water, to the girl who stands alone at the sea. The ocean is the color of milk and green-gray leaves. It's cold, overcast. I can see the goosebumps on her legs. She happens to wear white. She must be 7 or 8. The girl goes to the water. I see her during the day, at night, when looking straight on in that highway drive hypnotic state. She reminds me of my nieces, the infants they were, the plastic tubs and soapy water, the sounds they made gurgling while they were bathed. 4. Once upon a time, the ground upon which we stand was merely a skin over the ocean. The god Pyramid poked it and flooded the land. Only 2 survived, a woman and a man sealed inside a ship of pulai wood. As the waters receded, they nibbled their way outside, dropped into a field of rhododendrons. Alone, they bemoaned the absence of children. Later, the woman gave birth from the flesh of her calves, from which we are all descended. 5. Water-stressed, the ice plant closes its stomata in daylight, curbing evapotranspiration, opens them at night to absorb more carbon dioxide. Phenotypic plasticity is the ability of an organism to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. Lettuce produces more phytochemicals. The intertidal crab remakes its gills. Arabidopsis undergoes dramatic transcriptomatic reprogramming. And so I walk away euphoric from the Lomas Tramway Public Library, unzip my jacket in the unseasonably hot October wind, imagining mesembryanthemum at the end of a long hallucinogenic twilight, waking brightly into morning. 6. Each month for 2 years, I let Dr. Samanen sink me deep into hypnosis. Her 19, 18, 17, 16, like the downward count at the start of old movies. And in there, I saw a series of creatures, tadpole, she-elephant, hippo, the double-humped camel inside which my infant self curled up peacefully. I'd leave her office without the capacity for speech, as if language were no longer inherent, as if the slow upward count lifting me back into consciousness was incomplete, and I lingered in some feral place where the outline of my body blurred and the space between me and my creatures no longer existed. 7. On the asphalt path at Shark Valley, the Tarzan screech of a limpkin knocks me back into midday, bicycling through muggy air, and I resume the alligator count. 28, 29, 30, 31, basking at path's side or half submerged in the slow. The year I bounce between high desert and wetlands, deeply incised riverbeds, and this 15-mile loop seeming to float on water. I swerve from the carapace of an apple snail, Pomacea caniculata, see a dozen more scattered on sawgrass, sedge sitting precariously atop a vanishing layer of Everglades peat. I am far from home here, where water hovers in all its forms, a behemoth pulsing through me, breath and breath, like Samoan octopus, children, fire, and water locked in an epic battle, triggering the rise of a boundless sea, yet another tale of the deluge wiping the slate clean. 8. In the 60s, in the backyard of the San Ildefonso Road house, we ran the spigot for hours, full blast, let go the garden hose to watch it corkscrew and dance, tried to catch it, tame it, pin it under our soaked shoes. High desert water ran wild those hot summers, sheen on the shoulders, cool shine, twisting our soaked heads, letting the drops fly. Bill Viola's slow motion video, The Raft, begins simply. Strangers wait for a bus or train, yawning, checking the time. Water blasts into the frame, right and left, leaden tsunami, fog, impenetrable cloud, all are taken down. The water recedes and stops, interminably drips from hems, shirt cuffs, torpid split ends. They labor into consciousness, lift themselves up, and only then can they reach out, pull each other up, telling me something about extremity, something I don't want to know. 9. Hiking into Pinyon, the mountain fades from green to yellow to caramel brown. 100 million dead trees in the Southwest alone. The bark beetle thrives on drought, devours the phlegm, starves the scaly trunks. Just one spark, campfire, cigarette, and a sea of brittle trees bursts wildly into flames. In Giza, 1250 BC, the dung beetle seemed to emerge spontaneously from its burrow, spurred by a mysterious force, and so was worshipped as Khepera, he who comes forth, pushing the sun faster on its course. The Egyptians placed gold scarabs over the hearts of the mummified, inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead. Make no failure in respect of me before the master of balance. 10. Professor Harold Wanless clicks through a series of images, Florida, Antarctica, a lecture entitled The Frightening Reality of Sea Level Rise for the crush of a standing room crowd, including the well-heeled and generously housed residents of Coral Gables. In the dark, we slip into the silence of black and white, a topography so stark, even our paper coffee cups seem to gush in comparison. Outside, the leafy banyans drip their aerial branches like lions' tails, and the houses keep shining on, mango, avocado, tangerine, cheerful amnesiacs, while a time lapse depicts shrinking ice sheets, disappearing beachfronts, and the room is so fraught with quiet, I stifle the urge to mumble and cough. 11. In anticipation of the great flood, the god Tochopa tucked his young daughter, Puke, into a pinyon trunk, hollowed and packed with nuts, tubers, and healing herbs, hoping she would survive, Find another, repopulate the world. As the waters began to rise, he sang and prayed, held fiercely to the trunk until he too and the woodpile and the houses and the village were subsumed, and all he could do below in the undertow was let her go. 12. The girl in white, her small ankles, the gray waves rising darkly into thunderclouds, the way she backs and backs away. 13. At Oleta River State Park, I leave the trail for a bench, watch the speedboats and yachts, solitary fishermen casting their nets, intermittent blasts of radio, hip hop, metal, and pop. I count 14 plastic bags embedded in limestone, hear the bubblings of bay water as it drifts up and through the shelf of calcium carbonate, coral, bryozoa, crinoids, microscopic algae. The fossiliferous peaks of Texas Guadalupe Mountains tell us a reef was there too in the Permian period, 280 million years ago, now 8,700 feet above sea level. A mass of gray rock shifts. I blink, watch it float, realize it's no rock, but a manatee, my first sighting. It's late February. They're still here for the winter. I have seen them only in books and pamphlets. Know they are endangered. Floodgates, boat propellers, monofilament. Each bears a unique pattern of scars, recognizable to researchers, one by one telling its tale of brutal encounters with humans. 14. My brother James has a nasty scar on his upper right thigh, Frankenstein zip, accidental fall into glass, frantic drive to the ER. 30 years later, he revealed the lie. No, it was self-inflicted, swinging broken bottles back and forth for the thrill of release and crash, ripping into himself. In barbed hula, Sigalet Lando spins a ring of knotted wire around her naked waist, 59 long seconds of ripping flesh, while the sea behind her rocks fitfully toward and away from the shore. She calls it an act of desensitization, reality numbed by the force of exhilarating velocity. 15. A mile from the peak and much too high for Pinyon anymore, a barking dog dissolves the spell. Someone else on the trail. From behind, I watch Paul's calves pulse and pulse, the curves of which still heat my thighs. Sweet ache, want. Like Peru in 2004, snow flurries at the Pampacawana Pass, the horse's footing no better than ours, the moment he dismounted, deciding to walk instead, watching his head, back, and legs from up on horseback, knowing it was a singular moment, disappearing, ablation, down-wasting, disarticulation. We break into words. Hey, pup, beautiful lab, rattlesnake ahead. Bits of sound almost bizarre in this alpine silence, a half day from the city's habitual multiplicity. Mornings in the espresso line with the decidedly impatient Gen X and Gen Y in wireless earbuds, one saying, I can't do it, I won't, while texting, paying, sliding his phone deftly into a pocket. At 12, Sierra attaches 2 photos to a text of 3 words and a URL that takes me instantly to the Alfred Wegener Institute website. Sounds under that Antarctic ice shelf. And I believe we can do it. Follow the logical thread. Power cord to outlet. Outlet to cables. Cables through earth, earth to power station, station to steam, steam from turbines, turbines stoked by coal, coal from long wall mining machines, machines with their spectacular drill bits going deep and deeper into black rock, rock once a soupy peat, plant matter and swamp crushed by 100 million years of pressure, weight, and heat. Is this what the girl feels down into bone? Wisps of hair riding the wind like cursive M's? How much do we want the deep? 16. Cocooned, a man wrangles a green garden hose. A woman labors to turn pages of a newspaper. Sheets billow and waft as the pillow dodges the sleeper's outstretched hand. Lars Jan's Holocene traps humans in a tank of rising water as a crowd in Times Square lifts a tide of cell phones, beauty of bodies submerged in mundane tasks, as if we could breathe in liquid, amphibious, as if lungs could adapt this quickly to the shift from air to wet, as if there is only a loveliness of bowl, chair, bucket, and not the anguish of so little space between surface and glass, spasmic vocal cords, lungs bursting with water. 17. A month before the flood, the sheep forgot to eat and sleep, obsessively watched the stars at night, told the shepherds the constellations foretold the destruction of the world. The shepherds gathered their flocks and pigs and families, climbed the top of Anka's Marka, watched as the mountains sank slowly into the sea. Sky, night and day beheld their long dizziness, the passing of sheep, herder, pig, and kin. 6 children survived as the mountain lifted, and forever after the people minded the slightest movement of stars, mapping and deducing and guessing. 18. In 2012, Dominique struggled at the end of day 3. Bobby grew deliberate with her poles. My hips went numb under my heavy pack. Later that night in the tent, I wrote, no water from San Isidro to the city limits, sweep of industrial waste, tires, paint drums, cars upended and embedded in earth. Mile 33 of 54, hiking the length of a dying river, we lost the sense of our edges, earlobes, fingernails, shins, more like stick figures in the petroglyph in La Bajada Canyon, climbing the ladder, disappearing into sun, wormhole, and moon. All was perforation. 19. Now deep in the aspens, I tell Paul how I dream their speckled trunks, leaves scattering flash, at some point realize they are not trees. No, I am standing between the legs of colossal birds, looking upward into their massive underwings. And I know a thunder below me will start when they lift their anisodactyl feet, walk, and I bounce up and tumble down fatally to earth. The trembling giant, Pando, weighs 6,615 tons, spreads across 100 acres in Utah, 47,000 aspens from a single seed, a single root system, the world's heaviest organism. The stroke-sensitive neuron, MRGPR-B4+, explains why mice respond positively to petting. The female katydid has human-like ears on its legs, tympanums vibrating at the frequencies of their male counterparts. The wingspan of the female atlas moth can reach a foot with a surface area of 62 square inches. It has no mouth, lives only 14 days after wriggling from its cocoon, sprouting enormous map-like wings. Have we ever thought to count these out? I mean, count. 20. At the Biscayne National Park Welcome Center, I arrived too late for a snorkeling trip, refused the self-guided tour, exit the building chiding myself. I watched the boat crowded with snorkelers, little black dots receding quickly into the distance. When we were little, the blue bathtub was big as a lagoon, and we'd take turns being bridge and diver, holding our noses, swimming end to end, pretending we were Jacques Cousteau, saying, I saw a whale, an eel, a seahorse, a starfish, plunging again and again until forced to get out, making room for two more. I delay and linger, dive once more to hold on, dreamy waterlog. At Shelha, Quintana Roo, 1996, numb to my severely sunburned back, I swam with the magnificence. Pterophyllum, Paracantherus, Hepatus, Saphurnia, tried to stay submerged all the way back to the airport, salt water blurring eyes and earshot. I'd become something else. Like the infants in that swimming pool footage, deep under the surface, chubby thighs and forearms, pupils half focused, belonging to some other world of echo and gills. Relenting, I re-enter the building, wander to the back where dioramas display creatures so fantastical, fingerprint siphoма, rainbow wrasse. I feel an opening, wide. Imagine Spider-Woman and the clans actually listen to Satuknang, abandon the assault on ice and mountain, walk away from the back door of the fourth world. Thank you. So now I just want to open it up to questions or comments. And again, if we have a little time at the end, I can read maybe the ending of the book. But however long, I think we have a little bit of time to talk about the book if anybody has a question.
I have a request.
Yes,
I'm not sure. Could you read 14 again?
Sure. "14. My brother James has a nasty scar on his upper right thigh, Frankenstein zip, accidental fall into glass, frantic drive to the ER. 30 years later, he revealed the lie. No, it was self-inflicted, swinging broken bottles back and forth for the thrill of release and crash, ripping into himself. In barbed hula, Sigalit Landau spins a ring of knotted wire around her naked waist, 59 long seconds of ripping flesh, while the sea behind her rocks fitfully toward and away from the shore. She calls it an act of desensitization, reality numbed by the force of exhilarating velocity."
Thank you. Thank you. It reminds me of someone.
I saw that Sigalit Landau is a video artist. I saw that work of that short video when I was at the Pompidou Center in Paris many years ago. Paul and I went there. They had a retrospective of feminist art. And so my brother James, this is a true story, has this really serious scar on his leg. This happened when we were young. We were at a shopping, I think in Albuquerque with my mom, and there's 6 of us kids, probably my grandmother. And we were in the store and he stayed outside and he just ripped into his leg. And we thought he had fallen onto glass. That's what he told us. And honestly, 30 years later, and I've immediately thought of Landau's video because you should look it up. It's pretty intense. Because I thought that, we're sort of pummeling forward in a technological age, and we can become numb to things because we're moving so quickly all the time, things that are painful. And I think about what's happening to the climate. And sometimes we're just busy. We're desensitized because we're scattered. There's a lot happening, and we don't stop to see what's happening around us, especially right now in terms of that. And we have to slow ourselves down to absorb what's going on the planet around us. And so it just made me think of this act of desensitization. When do we become desensitized to all the information that we're getting about climate change, and when do we feel like it's too much and we turn away, and when do we need to turn to the pain and the destruction that's happening to our planet? When do we need to turn to it and change the way that we live so that we prevent the extinction of these remarkable creatures and the extinction of ourselves? And so that's where that section, and again, as I said at the beginning, the poem is like it attracts all of its stuff to it, but at the center is this idea of what makes us turn to or turn away from what's happening to our climate, and how can a work of poetry, because that's the genre I work in, take that on. I was saying to someone a couple of months ago, I'm also kind of interested in how much can a poem hold? This poem has got like stories and scientific facts and memories and counting. And I'm sort of interested as a poet, how much can a poem hang on to and still remain a poem if it's that? How can it hold to the things that we care about socially, politically, environmentally, still have music? It's in couplets, this book, still hold a poetic form, still bring children into it and images of beauty. And I'm sort of interested in how much can I stretch this genre of the poem to hold on to things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And what strikes me most is why do we feel we have to desensitize ourselves? But we do, because I guess because it hurts. So you have to desensitize yourself. But this Landau's video, tell me more about that. How do I look that up?
I don't know if you can find it online, but you can look her up as an artist. Again, I saw it when we were in the Pompidou Center. It's a powerful, yes, because it is a video. It's just you can see her torso, and it's silent. But as she hula hoops this barbed wire, this ring of barbed wire, it cuts into her flesh.
Mm-hmm.
It's intense
and powerful. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Other comments and questions?
Hey, Valerie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? It's Catherine Saluha.
Hey. Hi, Catherine.
How are you? Hi. This is stunning work. I've been looking forward to it a long time. I'm almost choking up. Wow. Talking to you. One incredible aspect from what you've read so far for me is the return, the deep, strong rope of the mythology aspect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Connections go in and out. So I was curious, I don't know if I can ask this, where you mined those stories there. Are they all your creation? If I may ask, are they your creation? Are you other cultural mythologies, or anything you can comment about that, just to shed some light?
Yes, thanks for that question. Well, I taught for some of you know, for 23 years. And so I taught poetry and literature, but I taught Latino literature and Native American literature for a good part of that. And so many of the stories I had encountered through teaching or books that I taught, others through reading other books. Some of them I found online. Some of them are just bits of stories. I think all of them are fairly accessible if you were to look them up. And I started to become interested while writing this book in deluge stories, flood stories. And so then I started looking back into my library and the things that I taught at those specific stories. And what was remarkable about them is this incredible sort of body of work stories in indigenous cultures or just stories from different parts of the world where people predicted the floods. And so the stories in this book come from all over the world in all different places. And so they began to inform me about seeing the signs in many of those stories. People are looking at signs, seeing that the water is coming. And so those became important to me into the book because right now, right this moment, right in the Gulf Coast, we see the signs of what's coming. We're watching the signs, and they're telling us how to save our lives, right? To live with greater balance. Later on in the book, sections I haven't read, there are more stories that have to do with being out of balance, and stories from all over the world from long, long ago that were meant to teach us to live in balance with the natural world. And so those exist throughout the book. Does that help?
Complete so much. It's a brilliant and so grounding aspect of what I've heard you read so far. Thank you, Valerie.
You're welcome.
Hey Val, it's Niall.
Hi, Niall. This is
How are
my
you?
nephew, everybody.
Hi, yeah, that's right. This is my first time hearing this, and I had a question that kind of sparked me, especially some interest to see where the book would go. I think it's a common urge you explore a little bit of water as life and as death here, and I think it's a pretty common. What really intrigued me to see where you take it is thinking about the coming climate change as thing that needs to be constantly pressed against. But I think then you also introduce a lot of aspects of the flood and these creation myths that due to like the wiping out of different races and the rebirth of different things on Earth. And I was wondering how you came into contact with that kind of counterbalancing theme there. Because I know it's easy to think conservation, stop the rising sea levels, which is true, but that creation, more biblical side of the world changing and us being like so in touch as the phones and the first poem talking about our society as it is, and you introduce this creational wiping of the slate. I wonder how you came to that to balance out the other myths you're exploring here.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I think the whole book in some ways, I mean, it's foreboding, right? There are many sections in the book that are very foreboding and about endangered creatures that are they're changing their own chemicals to try to survive heat and all of the changes in the climate. And at the same time, just what you said, these kind of more dear images of bathing my nieces and nephews when they were young, or being in the bathtub with my sibling when we were little kids. And I think the book is constantly trying to move back and forth with this idea of balance, of beauty, of love for the natural world, and also just, alarm bells. And the book is also, again, in couplets. So there is a kind of energy to the book of trying to bring things in twos together into balance, things that are not, right? In this section that I read, you can find this video online, Bill Viola's short video, The Raft. And I saw this, I think, in Miami when I there. And it's this remarkable video. It's in slow motion and it's silent. And they're actors, of course, but they're a group of people standing as if they're at a bus stop, and they're just checking their time. They're strangers. And water, just like I said in the section of the poem, comes into the frame. And I mean, blasts into the frame and just knocks them all over, just totally wipes them out. And it takes them a long time to recover, to like get up and realize what just happened. And it's only after they can kind of get up from the water do they start to help each other up. And in that section, I say at the end, it tells me something about extremity, something I don't want to know, which means that sometimes in the midst of extremity, right, we've got a hurricane happening right now, you know, like, how do we help? How do we help each other? How do we stop it? Right. So extremity is where we are in terms of our climate. We're not like, okay, we got a lot of time. We're in an extreme situation with climate devastation on our planet. And and it can be dizzying, but we need to get up. We need to get up, and we need to start to change our lives or support organizations that are working. And, you know, whatever we can do right now to get ourselves up and hold on to each other and try to change things for all of the generations to come, our children, our nieces and nephews. So I think, if this answers your question, the whole book is trying to find some place in the middle of a vision of destruction and great love for flora and fauna and for each other. Does that help?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Valerie?
Yes.
This isn't really a question, but it's a comment. First, I just want to thank you so much for this book. And what I love about this is the interweaving of the experiential with, like, you're hiking on the loose trail and the walking along the Santa Fe River that you all did. But I also really enjoy all the research that you did and all of the information, for instance, about the weight of the aspen grove. It makes me want to now do more research. And I find, because I have such a whole library of poetry, what I love about this is that I keep going back and rereading the individual poems. And I love that. And I have really, really appreciated this book a lot. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Basha. And for that, again, beautiful image that I get to look at every day, all day. Yes, and my last book, which is very different, Each and Her, also a book-length poem, had some of the same thing, not as heavily in terms of kind of information as this one. And that's what's, you know, like, there were times during this book when I thought, is this a poem? Is it an essay? I tried it in a lot of different forms. Actually, I tried to put it in prose poem form, in essay form, but my original impulse was couplets. And there's a book by the poet A.R. Ammons, if you know him, called Garbage. It's a long time ago, and it's also about the world, about garbage, but it's in some ways about waste, and it's in couplets. And it was I read many, many book-length poems for my last two books, as many book-length poems as I could get my hands on. And that one's in couplets. And I started in couplets, and then I tried over years to change the form of this book. And I came back to couplets for some of the reasons that I've talked about. But couplets made it a little hard with all this factual information, because I kept thinking, is this not resonant that I'm holding to the couplet form, but I'm trying to get all these facts in there. But somehow I think it stayed that way. And you may have noticed there's also quite a bit of music in this poem. You may not get it by reading it, but by listening to it. I didn't want to let go of what poetry does best, because I've got so much factual information in there. Like, I wanted to stay true to what makes poetry poetry, which is music and the line, and at the same time, just cram a lot of data almost into the poem, because it seemed to me to be responsible to where we are in terms of climate devastation right now. Like, I didn't want to write a poem that wasn't responsible about the facts of what's happening. And so I have to tell you all, this was a really hard book to write. I almost gave up a few times. I also told myself after my previous book, I said I would never write a book-length poem again. It's too hard. At some point, you have all the sections on the floor. You know, in Each and Her, it was 72 sections. And at one point I got lost in the rearrangement of the sections. I couldn't figure out how to make the poem come together. And I said I would never do it again. And then when I started writing this poem, I was like, what am I doing? It's torture. Same thing. I had in the revisions put the pieces on the ground and I couldn't figure out how to put them back. So I don't know in a way how it came back together, but now that I read it, I'm fine with it. I think it could be arranged 100 ways, but right now it's arranged the way it is. And so it's a hard, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to write another. Next book is just going to be individual poems that don't have anything to do with each other or something. But yeah, so again, this idea of how much can the poem hold?
I was just wanting to follow up on that comment. When you were putting it together, what were you thinking about in terms of form? Were you thinking in sections, or were you more concerned with, sort of the flow from the end of one poem into the next? I mean, obviously you have to do all of those kinds of things at once, but what was your approach to architecture?
It's a little bit like a map, like a visual map. And as I start working, that's what I start thinking about. I start thinking there are these threads. The book has all these threads, right? References to flora and fauna, references to works of art, counting, right? And there's many of them. There's probably 7, the stories. And then I have to try to think, when does the stitch need to come up? When does the next stitch? Those of you who've been in workshops with me, and I see many of you here, we've talked about this. How do you make the stitches keep coming up periodically so the whole thing holds together, kind of like a weaving? And so as I'm reworking it, I'm thinking about that. When did I mention the girl? When does she need to come up again? Right? When are you going to forget about her? And so that's how the whole thing becomes this like weaving of these threads. And somehow you have to try to make it work so that you could read this book, 7 times, let's say, just for those sections. You could say, okay, I'm going to read the book for just the creatures. I'm going to read the book for every time counting comes up, or I'm going to read the book for all the stories. And you could read the book that way. And so I was managing all of those layers and levels at once. I don't know why. It's torture. I don't know. I didn't decide. It just happened. And then I had to keep doing it, I think. Should I finish maybe by reading the end of the book? Would that be okay?
Yeah, you can do that. I just want to read a comment. Mary
Oh, yeah,
wrote.
Mary.
She made a really nice comment. It says, it takes a poet to pull us back from the swirl of details and arrange them in a comprehensible collage so we can make sense of it all. The stitching together with descending numbers followed by ascending numbers, the manatee's scars followed by your brother's scars, so brilliant, Valerie. That scene in Florida with the lecturer, the silence, profound. I wish I could hear you read the whole book.
Oh, thank you so much, Mary. Mary is our Albuquerque Poet Laureate, everybody. If you don't know Mary, a beautiful poet. Thank you so much, Mary, for being here and for all of your work. Yeah, I'm not so good while I'm talking, looking at all of your comments. Thank you for those. I'll ask for the chat so that I can read all of them. So I'll just read maybe the end of the book. These are just sections 38 through 42. 38. In the next 35 years, 400 million climate migrants will flee coastlines and inland flooding, abandoning to water most of what they have in a strange reverse narrative, like the girl on the shore stepping back from the waves, as if caught on old VHS tapes when the ribbon gets stuck, forward, snapping back, forward, and snap. And so we fixate on the corner of her white hem as it keeps making a perfect loop. Oh, 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 like the white hot trail of a sparkler, the mesmerized look on Annalisa's face as we taught her how to keep the stick circling in the dark till she sees it, the white continuous line. And when it burned too close to her fingers, the way she yelped, bolted to the nearest body of water, wine in the plastic cup of her grandmother, arc of the spark line from stick to liquid, the panic, the way my mother stretched the cup forward while leaning back, the sizzle of the spark as it broke the surface. 39. Hiking into the transition zone, the juniper gives way to ponderosa pine, Gamble oak, New Mexico locust. Vertigo takes me down over a fallen trunk. Paul crouches, drops his pack, checks for blood, waits for the spinning to stop, one of too many episodes. 11 years battling with what no doctor can explain. Inconclusive ear tests, no vestibular neuritis, negative brain scans, scant exposure to mercury, lead, and tin. Articles about benign paroxysmal positional vertigo theorize that calcium crystals break off the utricle, tumble into the cupola, the degenerate effects of stress, aging, or some other trauma. Susanna Sigeti paints trees from upside down perspectives, as if we are headstanding, looking upward into pleaches, roots pooling at eye level. From there, the canopy balloons into a new thing, sea green, gift of sick reorientation. 40. The last half mile of the descent is tough on the back, and so I begin to count my steps, a distraction that creates a soothing beat in my head. I count in 3s and 9s, lucky numbers, insert the names of insects and plants, first and second cousins, rivers and bays, until the girl finally turns to me and waves, split-second recognition, and I can almost leave her fearlessly on the shore. In Paris, 10e arrondissement, Basha Erland launches book 14 on the Canal Saint-Martin, an ice book embedded with native seeds, eco-language, riparian text. It liquefies as it floats, reseeding the riverbank. The toddler on her website sits cross-legged before an ice book, small dark head and purplish dress, patterns of seeds, the story she reads, palms up, hands cupped as if divining. 41. The Yellowstone believe at one time the people hunted for sport, burned and cleared forests, stopped thinking of animals as their kin. And so Great Spirit let the smoke from their fires sit in the valley. They coughed and choked, but did not abandon their ways. Great Spirit sent thunder and rain, flooding roads and dwellings, inundating the fields. Only then did they turn to Spotted Bear, medicine man, who sent the youngest hunters for buffalo. For weeks, they slogged and searched. Along the way, fear forced them to transform their relationship with nature. They returned with the hide of a white bull who drowned in the floodwaters. Half starved, the people watched as Spotted Bear scraped and stretched the hide for hours and days until it grew the size of the whole of the valley. They lifted it and huddled beneath. Finally, the rain stopped and the sun emerged, shining hour after hour, day after day, shrinking the hide until all that was left was a patch that dissolved into a rainbow arch. And Spotted Bear declared that the people, no longer at odds with the earth, would survive. 42. In 2013, hundreds of Miamians walked and chalked 26 miles of city streets, a high waterline where, by century's end, 3 feet of sea level rise will remake the city into somewhere more like Venice, Jakarta, ancient Alexandria. For over 15,000 years, pilgrims have hiked the circular path beneath Mount Kailash, 52 kilometers, 52,000 meters, 2,047,244 inches. Ascending the peak at 21 21,778 feet is forbidden. Some complete the journey in 25,000 prostrations. At first, each rustle, footfall, birdsong is precise. One can detail their singularities, contours, length. Then a blur comes on, defying separation, until one song rings through the body, mountain, air, and all breath seems one harmonic respiration. Pilgrims believe making the pass at Dol Malah and all the way back will erase the sins of a lifetime. 43. The adolescent goddess Hadanishte was encircled by creatures, thin, delirious, reflected in the tears of her people. She punished the tribe for negligence, put them to work reassembling the fragments of a disintegrating world. After much toil, each piece, cleaned and burnished, flashed a sliver of sunlight by day, moonlight by night, billions of which could not be looked at directly. In this way, they learned to be reverent and disciplined, to live on the edge of great balance, the sum of incalculable beauty. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. That was amazing. There were some wonderful comments. If you want to go and read the comments for a minute, thank you so much. If you want to turn on your video and just cheer Valerie for what a gift. This thing that you said you'd never do again. So we're so grateful that you did it again.
Yes, we are.
No.
Thank you, Val. It's gorgeous.
Thank you, Val. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bravo.
Valerie, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Truly
Thank you.
wonderful.
Good to see you.